it's a wonderful good morning to you, Grenada, Carrick, Martinique, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, and to you wherever you are. This is Classic in the Morning Time. Classic 105.5 and 105.9 on the FM band. Welcome to The Point for today, the 14th day of the month of March. We're literally inching closer towards the halfway mark, and indeed it's a pleasure being here with you. I say good morning also to our listeners, or viewers that is, just joining us on via television, Channel 7, Channel 11, and Channel 20 if you are in cable. A special good morning to all of our viewers who joined us via the different social media platforms, via be it YouTube or our Facebook page, and even those joining us via the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd. I say good morning to you. I'm Joseph Cadore, and indeed it's a pleasure being here with you this morning. My guest this morning, as we take a delve into what's happening in the field of social work, and there's so much that happens that within our society, different ministries, different individuals that comes together as social workers to address different issues that ranges at different levels within our society. And this morning, I want to say thanks. Joining us from the Ministry of Social Development is Don Cyrus, and from the Ministry of Health, he's a trained counselor, educator, and everything else that goes with his name, Father Reverend Edward Mark. My dear sir and lady, good morning to you, and welcome to The Point.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Good morning, Chief. Good morning, Chief Father Mark, Reverend Mark.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Cadore and viewers throughout this land and the diaspora. It's a pleasure to be here on your program this morning.
It's a pleasure having you both to kickstart the week. Now let's talk about, we hear about social workers, and we very often we think about social workers. What do they do? Ms. Cyrus, as you could well imagine, and I'm sure Reverend would not hold it against me if I would say ladies first, and we'll start things off with you. Let's look, when we look at the role of social workers, a social worker, what exactly does that job or that task encompass on any given day?
Okay, so let me say once again a pleasant good morning to the listening public, those on social media, and it's a pleasure to be here. So as a social work, as we say, we start from the tomb, from the womb to the tomb. And the Ministry of Social Development within we more or less is the government's entity that provide the safety protection services for the state. So as a social worker, we are responsible for improving the lives of all of our citizens. We operate on core values and principles, which is service. You have social justice, dignity and worth of persons, the importance of human relationships, integrity and competency. So as a social worker, sometimes we cannot predict our day. We have a plan. So as a ministry and as a division, we have day-to-day things that we do ongoing. So we have programs that address the needs of the vulnerable, the persons in need of financial, person in need of material assistance. But on any day, a social worker can plan her day, and when you come in, a client will be there, and that client is desperately in need of help. What can we say? We cannot turn our back. We have to smile and deal with that issue. What we do as a division, we work together as a team, but we also refer and we network.
Right. So it is safe to say, while there's this stereotype that normally that's attached to many government employees, for social workers, your job is really hands-on, isn't it?
Yes, hands-on. So we deal with as the problem comes. As I said, we will plan it, but as the problem comes, we have to deal with it. So we cannot predict how a day will go, but what we can assure the public that we will do what we have to do, and at the end of the day, our client will leave our division smiling.
We're going to get later on in the conversation. We're going to delve into some of your clients, who they are, and some of the specific services that you provide as a ministry. Reverend Mark, thank you again for being part of the program. You're a former educator, you're a clergyman, counselor. You literally come with everything under your belt, don't you?
Well, by the grace of God, no, I thank God for the opportunity for these experiences, so it will enable me to exercise and execute my duty as a social worker.
Before we go on further, I don't know if you went into your recliner mode again, but you seem as though you're down in a hole again. Yes, that's a little better. That is a little better. As a social worker, Father, Reverend, I know you were in speaking with you. You spent a number of years as an educator, counselor, and in the last 4 years, you've been attached with persons that are mentally challenged as part of your day-to-day function.
Yes, indeed. Being a social worker attached to the Richmond Hill institutions, which includes the Monge Psychiatric Hospital and the Richmond Home for the Aged. Yes, I've been working with these individuals, these patients or clients at the hospital and in the community.
Let's kickstart with you. Persons, there's one of them, and there's a number of challenges. And I'm assuming you would both agree that as a social worker, there's a number of challenges that you deal with, especially that you have to deal with people on a day-to-day basis. Your ability to connect, to cope with people, addressing, highlighting their everyday challenges is one thing, Miss Walker, Miss Cyrus. But even Mr. Mark, you would agree. So while people may have financial needs, social needs, their mental needs, though, very often you get the sense that that's an area that very often gets marginalized and stigmatized.
Yes, Mr. Cadore, the issue of mental health and mental illness, it appears, and I can speak with the context of Grenada, that it appears to be a curse. For example, we treat someone or persons with chronic illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, it's treated and we work well. Persons with various forms of cancers, we treat them, it work well. Even HIV/AIDS. But when it comes to mental health, there seems to be a curse. And therefore, God forbid, we treat these persons who are mentally ill or mentally challenged, as we would say, in a manner that is really inhumane. So, as a social worker attached to psychiatry, that's change that we are faced with stigma. And as such, while we operate on a day-to-day basis, and as the need arises, as my colleague would alluded to, we have to spend a lot of time sensitizing, right? One, the individual, because sometimes the client might be in a state of denial. Two, we try our best to reach out to families to address coping skills with them. Three, the community. And we have to, from time to time, speak to neighbors or villagers, enlightening them on this issue of mental illness. And most of the time, we get community support, because if the patient is acting in an unusual manner, they would contact the community health workers or even me as a social worker, and we get to it, as soon as we get the message. But mental health and mental illness, it's a big challenge as we face it here in Grenada. One may allude to the fact that it's a worldwide phenomenon, but we have to look in-house at where we are now. So that is the biggest challenge we face here in psychiatry, is the stigma. There are many other challenges, but the stigma associated with mental illness.
And Ms. Cyrus, you, and I'm certain, with all your years of experience, and while your day-to-day functions, they vary in that of your Reverend Mark, you would agree, though, that each and every one of us, Ms. Cyrus, we do suffer one way or the other with some form of mental variation, I will put it, because even in every day, there are days when I'm stressed. You're stressed.
Yes.
And you might be stressed because financially we probably finances are depleted, as you say. Maybe there's a need that the person has. So let's talk about from your end, because maybe what we're recognizing, maybe what Reverend Mark is recognizing, is the back end of what you probably have to deal with, and persons that are at different levels socially and economically with various issues. So you talk about some of your clients, and let's talk about some of the everyday issues. We're going grassroots now. As a social worker, what are some of the everyday problems that you have to address?
Well, first of all, our ministry, we have a ministry for social development, housing, and community empowerment. We have different units. So our units provide different services. So we have probation, we have the elderly, we have gender, we have the parenting. But as a division, we deal with different clients. So our clients that may will come in may have an issue. It may be housing, but that housing will bring on a level of stress. Mm-hmm. The whole mental status of that family, who at one time, as we said, we think we were normal, but we have some level of abnormality one time or the other, depending on the immediate environment. And we do know that now with the pandemic, it has gotten worse. So once we identify a family with a particular issue, we go beyond. So the presented issue may be a house, but when they come to us, the one housing material, we have the psychosocial unit within the ministry. So on talking to that particular client, you realize the house repair is not really the issue. There are other domestic problems within that home that we have to address. So in addressing it now, we pull up, we have case conferences. Mm-hmm. So we pull our resources within our ministry, and if not, we go to other ministries as Pastor Mark, and we say, how can we help that particular individual, but also as a family, because we cannot separate that person from his or her family. So the family may have a presenting issue, but as social worker, we go beyond the presented issue through probing, and we realize that is bigger than actually what to say.
Your day-to-day job, it can be very daunting, Ms. Cyrus.
Yes. The day-to-day job, and I said, in all my years of service, it might be strange to see, there's never a day that I never want to go to work. I always want to work, because we have an excellent team. And because of that teamwork we have within our division and our ministry, and the support we have at the management level, it more or less ease some of our burden. But every day, as I said, there is some level of stress, and we have a system where we bounce off on each other. We have the psychosocial unit, so even though we ourselves go through some stressful moment, we can go to the counselor and we ourselves can access that service.
Well,
the clients that we have, they come in, as I said, and we cannot predict. Sometimes we know what they come for, and sometimes they themselves don't even know what they come for. They come in tears, and they might just be sitting there and crying soberly, and you want to know what is the problem. Give them the opportunity to cry. Our main division is a division that people will vent, and they vent all sorts of things, and they feel safe within our walls that they will stay there, and we work with them, and then all the issues that come up, we may able to provide the service immediately, or we may seek assistance from other unit or other ministries or agencies.
Collaboration, patience, no doubt, has to be
teamwork,
a critical component to your day-to-day functions. But what are some of the more, what are some of the other qualities that really makes for a good social worker?
Well, a good social worker, as I said, we operate on our principles. So we service to people. We serve community. We serve with regardless of the political affiliation, the religious belief, the gender. It doesn't matter what. We serve. We also take the person as an individual who is worthy, that has worth, that has a past. We all have a story. So we do not go on what we hear before, although it may add some value, but at least we give that person a voice. So we are the voice for the voiceless and those who are marginalized. We are competent because we are competent in our area. We look at the human relationships that so we have the importance of having human relationship, the importance of family and community empowerment and development.
We keep keeping our eyes on the clock. 17 minutes gone past the hour in the morning time. My guest this morning was Dawn Cyrus from the Ministry of Social Development and Reverend Edward Mark representing the Ministry of Health. Reverend Ms. Cyrus touched on a lot of things, and I know certainly you would agree as a man of the cloth that man is not just material. He is spiritual, and very often I guess the challenge is trying to dissect mentally and creating that balance in providing some form of spiritual support against the person's their other needs. And I'm assuming that is a balancing act that you have to play, and you have to do it quite delicately. Reverend Mark?
Yes, of course. The spiritual needs of the individual is very, very important. Now, we must respect the fact that not all of our clients that may be believers in the blood of Jesus. So I am definitely mindful of that, and we are definitely mindful of that. But in the whole aspect of reaching out, in the whole aspect of trying to ascertain where the problem lies, of course, I'll be on that. Are strong believers in the Most High, you know.
We've been through a difficult.
And
sorry.
We also have to take into consideration also.
Father Mark, we seem to be having
the state of
Father Mark,
mind of the
Reverend Mark.
Yes, the state of mind.
We seem to be having, well, not seem, we are having some technical challenges with Reverend Mark, and it's kind of compromising the quality of the conversation. We'll try to get back to Reverend Mark in just a bit. But Cyrus, let's look at the last 2 years, and it serves as a point of reference. And not that we're going to blame everything on the last 2 years. I know very often it is easy to blame everything on COVID, but certainly as a social worker, the last 2 years, the pandemic, it has brought a lot to the fore, hasn't it?
Yes. As frontline workers.
We got cut off a bit, Mr. Cadore.
Yes, I'm going to come with you because we're having some challenges with some connectivity challenges that was compromising the quality of the broadcast. So I'm going to be back with you. I'll be back with you, but I'm happy that you're actually back. Yes, Ms. Cyrus, you were saying we looked at the last 2 years.
As frontline workers, we work 24 hours around the clock. So we know our commitment is to serve and to improve the lives of our citizens. So we cannot back down. So within a pandemic, we were out in the front line, and we had a hotline, a 24-hour hotline. So persons did access and were able to access our services. So we worked with those, especially in terms of those who were in quarantine, those who were in isolation. So we had to provide hot meals. We provide food hampers, whether water, sanitizing solutions, and the whole works. So we were there, and not forgetting, we did telecounseling to our psychosocial support unit. So we were there on the ball. And it was very risky for us because we know that we are going out to families that we know are in isolation and are at risk. So during that pandemic, our core values stepped in, and it was high care because it was service to people. So we worked not harder, but smarter. We worked smarter, and we continue to work smarter in terms of where there's a the post-pandemic period. I don't know if we really get out of it, but during the lockdown, we worked, and we never had a day that we had to remain at home. And even when we opened, we retrofit our offices. We have sub-offices in all the parishes, so persons could have access our services, and we made it safe, so persons can come and use our services despite the COVID condition. We didn't use it as an excuse and did not go to work.
What are some of the growing trends that as a ministry you've come to realize in more recent times, not just COVID, but let's say the last 5 years as a people and as a social worker? What are some of the growing trends that you've realized?
Some of the trends that we realized that I think the whole economic conditions for a lot of our families, and we know a lot of them are headed by females. And because of that, the loss of jobs, or the uncertainty of the economical environment, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, we realize that persons were faced with a number of issues. So the trend is that persons continue looking for financial assistance, looking for some material assistance, wanting to keep children in school. We realize some of the families that we thought that was stable, because of that stress and that environment that they were thrown into without no cause or preparedness, that they went through some period of depression, of stress, and it still continues. So over the 5 years, and even more so, we realize that more and more persons are reaching out to us. As a matter of fact, we have to increase our budget allocation to assist these persons who are looking for more assistance for us. Because as I said, we are the safety net, the safety protection entity. So they come to us, and we cannot say no. We have to find the resources. So we have things like the burial assistance. We doubled our budget because we had so many persons to assist during the COVID period. You have families that have a household that lost 3 and 4 family members, and they have to come to us, and we had to attend to them.
Father
So we
Mark,
had all that sort of budget and increase
right.
in terms of material and finance. We had to increase, and because in the trend is that persons are looking for assistance. They are desperately looking for assistance.
as a social worker, and I'll pose this to you now, and I'm going to go to Father Mark. As a social worker, those trends that you're seeing, there are those that would argue that it's a direct indicator as to what's happening within our economies, what's happening not just locally, globally, and everybody's feeling it.
Globally, because we are island, but we're not isolated from the world. So whatever happens internationally has an impact on us. We depend a lot on the outside for a lot of our goods and services. So we cannot offer everything, and persons out there. So imagine somebody who is accustomed to getting the remittance from the family in the USA or some other, and that person lost their job. It has an impact on the immediate family in Grenada. So that family will look to the Ministry of Social Development for some assistance. So what happens globally definitely affects us locally. And we have to deal with that. As I said, we cannot turn out the way.
As a social worker, have you seen an erosion, Ms. Cyrus, of what traditionally was the middle class? There are some who
lost you a little. I lost you a little.
There's some that argue that in more recent times that you've seen an erosion in what was. We've seen an erosion in what traditionally was referred to as the middle class. That a lot of people are slipping more from that was traditionally middle class. They're slipping now into the lower levels of society.
All right. Well, because we say the middle class, and sometimes we have this notion that because someone might be in a job that we think that they should be earning a higher income, but in reality, that person is struggling within the home. So we place them in a category and say they are middle class. They might be doing a job that is a good job, but financially, that person is not doing well. So when it comes to social service, that's why in terms of the worth, and we understand what is happening within the home. So while you may think it is a middle class, because of this economical environment, that person lost the job, or the person on a half-month pay. The person, they still have to service the bank. So we realize that, yes, they were middle class, but indeed, because of the environment that they are faced with now, they have to depend. And sometimes people may want assistance for a short term. It may not be a long term. So is it a short term? And we try to bring them to a state where they can function. And they, as we said, okay, they come back to the lower class because of a presenting situation. We work with them and they may resume the job, they resume to have a better state of mental health, and they're able to function.
Resuming to a state of mental health, Reverend Mark. We're listening to Ms. Cyrus. You've noticed that the last couple of years has been challenging. What have you been able to ascertain, and what has been your evaluation regarding people's general mental health in the last couple of years?
In the last couple of years, we have seen a larger amount of persons suffering from various strains mentally. Sometimes it might be just an emotional level, and then they slump into depression, anxiety, and one thing leads to another. One of the things that perhaps we as citizens are not doing, there are a number of persons who might be feeling a certain way, and they say to themselves, I can handle. They say to themselves, I am good. And gradually they disintegrate, and it gets to a point where they would need urgent medical attention. And in some cases, it leads to admission here at the psychiatric hospital or even at the general hospital. So clearly, there is an increase in persons who are seeking mental health treatment throughout the land. We have also seen an increase also in young people, teenagers. So we have a child clinic on Tuesdays at the General Hospital. And of course, the records are there to show that we have seen an increase in our teenagers, our children. This increase is across the board. Age is not really a factor because it affects each and every one of us, each and every age group. So yes, there is a challenge as it relates to the mental state of us here in Grenada. But I will also hasten to add, despite that we have the pandemic, and also we had to make certain adjustment, what we call the new normal, but we have circumstances prior to COVID. So COVID basically put the icing on the cake, but there were existing circumstances, issues, challenges that individuals or family would have been facing. So COVID more or less catapulted the whole situation, and it became really, really exacerbated over the past 2 years.
Indeed. It's about 29 minutes onto the hour of 10 o'clock in the morning time. We take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back with my guest this morning, Reverend Edward Mark and Miss Dawn Cyrus. Quick commercial break. We'll be right back right here on To The Point.
Join GBN on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. for Interesting Grenadians, a program that showcases the lives of interesting and outstanding Grenadians at home and abroad. It's Interesting Grenadians every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on GBN. Don't you miss it.
Get ready for a season of grooving smooth and live on GBN. Grooving Smooth and Live is a 1-hour performance gig every Thursday from 8 p.m. featuring performances from our local musicians and short interviews discussing all things musical. Every Thursday, a different musician and a different instrument will be featured, from the violin to the saxophone to the trumpet, guitar, and steel pan. Our local musicians playing, improvising, and educating us on all genres of music. Join GBN with host musicians Matthias and Shireen and a special guest every Thursday at 8 p.m. It's Grooving Smooth and Live on GBN.
Thank you. Welcome back to the program, To The Point, for today, the 14th day of the month of March. My guest this morning from the Ministry, representing the Ministry of Health, he's a counselor, former educator, Reverend Edward Mark, and from the Ministry of Social Development, Ms. Dawn Cyrus. My dear sir and lady, welcome back to the program. As we go forward, remember you can be part of the conversation as we join the caller on the line. Good morning, caller. You're live. Good morning, sir. You are live. Hello.
Yes, good morning. Is that GBN?
Yes, you're live. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm listening to the conversation, especially what the Reverend is saying. And he mentioned something about people don't believe in the blood of Jesus. And so that adds a different dimension. Now, to me, from what I've observed, from what I've read and studied when I went to do psychology, I'm a BSc in psychology, and I recognize that psychology, psychiatry, and sociology do not address the total man. They address the physical, and they totally and largely ignore the spiritual. Now, man, first of all, is a spirit, and he has a soul and a body. But what these entities address is what happens physically. Very rare, you might hear somebody talk about the spiritual. Now, 90% of what is called mental illness is demonic possession, demonic manipulation, and these people need spiritual deliverance. And as long as we do not administer deliverance to some of those people we call them mentally challenged, the things they do. Now, you have a fellow who slaughtered a man who we used to call daddy. Don't tell me that is normal, or that's just, he's just wicked and you want to do that. That is demonic possession, demonic manipulation. And this is what we need to address. We need to make sure that when somebody says are behaving in a way, have they received the conversion? Have they received Christ? Do they have Christ living in them? So that the devil cannot manipulate them, because demon possession is from the devil. And this is what is happening to a lot of our young people. They the internet. They go on the web and they get enough demons that enter them through the web. And that's why we're having all this problem.
But would you agree, caller, and I understand the point that you're making, but when we look at people being mentally incapacitated, we're not just looking at persons that are, you saying, quote unquote, that have demon birth, that they possessed, and we agree that there's a spiritual element to it.
Yes.
But I think what we want to do is to broaden the conversation and to highlight the fact that each and every one of us, at some point, we have some form of mental strain.
Yeah, I'm not denying that.
So I want to say,
that's why I said 90% of what is called mental illness is not mental.
Okay, well, let me
because I listened to a program on your station the other day, and the person was saying that there are people who are sick, according to the gentleman. I think was on to the point. Not on to the point on the Monday night program. And he said they sent them to the doctor to examine, and they're not mentally ill, but they're not right.
Okay.
That is demonic possession, and that is where we have to concentrate.
Yeah, but I think that's where the challenge comes in, because whenever we see somebody that has a mental challenge, the first thing that we conclude is that they are possessed demonically.
No,
but let's see if we can get Father Mark.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get Father Mark. Father Mark, your thoughts? And I think, to me, that sort of adds to where the point that we are making as it relates to the stigma and the challenge of addressing persons that have they are mentally deprived, one way or the other. What say you?
Well, of course, I am of the belief that there are circumstances where we can conclude or prove is demonic possession. But that number that the caller is raising there, I respect her opinion and her sharing, but I totally disagree. You see, we have, in the Ministry of Health, we have trained personnel. For example, we have the psychiatrists, we have the sociologists, yes? And if somebody has demonic possession, then the family and those who know and can prove they are demon possessed, they need to see an exorcist, They need to see an exorcist because it's a spiritual issue. But generally speaking, a lot of our diagnosis coming on over the years, yes, I don't believe, and I'm convinced by the Spirit, is not demon possession. There are cases, but that exorbitant number, I totally disagree.
And would you both agree that that's one of the challenge to? Sorry, yes, go ahead.
That is one of the challenges that presently we face, because everything we alluded to demon possession, everything, yes, and there are persons trained to diagnose, and sometimes we don't listen to them. There's a regime of treatment afforded. We as relatives who are assisting the person who has a mental illness, we throw the medication and so on. So we do not give it a chance, yes, to manifest itself. So sometimes I ask the question, if you know or you diagnose a person's illness, why come to the doctor? Yes? Why come to the doctor? You know it is demon possession, take the person to an exorcist. Because doctors, as far as I know in Grenada, they do not go through a regime of training to provide exorcism. So if persons in the community knows that the person's behavior is demonic or satanic, and in some cases they are, then they have to see an exorcist. Outside of that, the medical practitioners who are trained and set apart by God to minister to persons with mental illness, just as they minister to persons with chronic illnesses, give them a chance to execute a God-given duty and talent.
Wow, and I think we'll both agree that some of therein lies the problem, Miss Walker. Miss Cyrus, why am I christening you over this morning? I guess because I have Father on with me. Maybe, Miss Cyrus, that as Father's indicated, all of these stigmas, Miss Cyrus, it adds to this growing challenge that people, because they may have a little stress the things are not going well, and long before you know it, because there's this fear that people would think that they're going loco, as they say, that plays on their mind.
Yes.
How does that affect what you do in terms of persons you attending to their needs, whether it's financial, social, but yet that mental part of it has to be given strong consideration?
Well, as I said, when we work with families, we work individual, but in a family setting.
Right.
So when a family comes to you and they have that belief that they are possessed, it more or less hinders the progress of our work. It's difficult to get beyond that, because no matter what we do, no matter what we try to administer, before them, they still believe, and they will be convinced, and will give you some examples, and they will go further and call a number of persons and even name the persons who they think would have done that act. So that person comes with the belief, because if the family can get a level of cooperation to support that individual who is desperately in need of help, then that already is a block. So we have, as long as we do not go past that hurdle, then our work becomes more difficult for persons who believe that no matter what we do, they are demon possessed. And as Father said, not everything, because we do not preach that sort of things to our client. We do not entertain certain things where people definitely come. Even in the court, you'll hear people coming and they say, this person do this and this person do that. So apart from the mental illness, they may come with other problems. And because if they may have a sewing ulcer, they will tell you it's because of X. Even though you send them to see the doctor, they will tell you certain person would have done something evil to them. So the belief has a lot to do in terms of how they use our services and how we access help for them.
Again, Reverend Mark, as Ms. Cyrus just says, our history, our attachment, we have a lot of social norms and folklores that has, over the years, has become part of who we are as a society, Reverend Mark. That in itself plays on our own psyche and affects the way we behave or choose not to behave.
Definitely. A lot of norms that we would have inculcated over the centuries. We have inherited certain norms and practices from our ancestors, of course. But the reality is, when a client or a family or community purports this sort of development, it puts all of us in a very difficult position, simply because the person trained, as I said earlier on, cannot minister because you come with mindset. But my question is, if you have that mindset, why come to a medical doctor? Why come to casualty? Why come to the hospital when you know, right? So when we engage these families now, there is a thick glass, yes, a very thick glass. And sometimes it may take months to make a breakthrough. It may take months ministering to these families, engaging them. For example, the major mental illnesses that affect us here in this land, and of course, certain behavioral patterns, and of course, you get literature and so on that that teaches and sensitizes, yes? So some persons may at a point, they break and open up themselves, yes, to medical examination and give the doctors and social workers and counselors a chance, But a lot, again, there are certain persons in the community, they are very influential. And as a result of their influence, they would say to a person, that is it. And the individual would not move.
We have a caller.
It creates a problem.
Right.
What happens there?
Thank you very much for taking
We have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller, you're live.
Okay. Thank you very much for taking my call, Mr. Joseph. Thank you very much. A pleasant good morning to the panelists. Now, let me first of all start by saying thanks to the ex-PRA Patriots and Welfare Association. They had a wonderful day yesterday, and what was spoken of I hope it will materialize. Well, it has started, and I must say thanks for that. Now, I do have a concern. 2 years ago, tomorrow 15th, would be 2 years since I lost my right leg. Now, at the hospital, I was informed by the doctors and the nurse that in my condition, I will need assistance for mobilization for the rest of my life. No, I may not be a poor person, but maybe I am in a vulnerable position. I am wondering because the Council for the Disabled 2 years ago informed me that the lady who was responsible for visiting me to get particulars is over 80. And because of the pandemic, she could not, or she was afraid to attend. However, I was switched over to the SEED program 2 years ago. To this day, I have had 3 phone calls, 28th of March, 2021, November 2021, and on each occasion, I was told that, okay, my application is in process or whatever it is. In November, they told me that in January, I would start receiving a small pittance. January came, they told me my name is not in the system. But they said maybe by February. Well, we are now in March, and I have not seen 1 penny, of which I really badly need. I mean, medication is a problem for me to find. As I said, I can't walk. I'm confined in a wheelchair. It's possible. I mean, I feel good. My voice might be sounding all right.
Okay, so
I might not be a poor person, but according to what I just heard the lady saying, you know, I am surprised because I feel victimized.
Okay, so let me see if we can get Miss Cyrus.
Yes, sir. Right, well, yes, caller.
Thank you, caller.
I heard your plea, and Mr. You can get my number of the air. Mr. Cadore can get the number of that caller, and I can assure him that before the end of the morning, that I'll give him a call and make some contact and personally visit him, because in the Ministry of Social Development we have a SEED unit, and we have process, we have procedures. So I will look into that, find him, and I will pay him a visit, and he will get some answers as to the status of his application. And if an application was not done, I will get to the SEED officer, and definitely we will get that application process.
So caller, feel free. We wrap up the program in just under 10 minutes. You can call me then once the program is ended, and I'll provide you with a direct number for Miss Cyrus. Sometimes it's just as easy as, expressing, getting the information out there.
It's not difficult.
Sometimes it isn't that difficult. 10 minutes onto the hour. We got to wrap in a while. But Reverend Mark, one of the challenges there is to dealing with persons that are mentally challenged, and I know when we normally hear mentally challenged, our brain goes to the extreme. We go to the extreme, and I know in conversing, we were talking about our laws, and even how we in society, the terms that we use to describe individuals, lunatics and all of these sort of terms that has its own connotations.
Yes, indeed. Presently, based on the Mental Hospitals Act that we are governed by, of course, over the years, there were amendments and so on, but there's a document that speaks of the Mental Hospital Act of, I think it's 1895 or 1897. I'm saying over the years, there perhaps were amendments. I know in 2009, thereabout, PAHO funded a project for the revision of our Mental Hospitals Act. and where in that old act the word lunatic perhaps appears over 100 times. Even the police officers, when they are called to assist us and they report to the scene of someone whose behavior is aggressive, yes, the urgency order that the police will present to casualty and to us here when the person is admitted to the psychiatric hospital. It speaks of suspected lunatic behavior. So that in itself adds to the stigma. That in itself belittles the individual. So that in itself needs to be looked at and to be reviewed. Also, one of the other challenges, of the many challenges that we face, is the ability of some family members to cooperate and to assist us. Some persons who are mentally ill, they are totally abandoned by their loved ones, and perhaps they are good Samaritans in the community who would minister to them, feed them, ensure that they take their medication, and of course, clothe them, give them everything. But there are family members who, for whatever reason, because, there are varied circumstances, so it's not a judgment call. It's just the reality that they're not cooperating. So persons are at the hospital and they're not visited by their loved ones. But some of these persons who may have a little income coming in, whether it's a little pension from a private company here, or even they would have worked on the NIS benefits, their family use it, and these are the things that we have to seek to implement laws to protect our mentally ill citizens, because we have a Child Protection Act, yes, and it protects our children. So in a similar way, we may have to look at legislation that's similar to the Child Protection Act, which protect not only, I don't want to be selfish, the mentally ill, but our senior citizens in general. We also have the problem of non-compliance. And in many cases, that is where we seek the assistance of the police. And I can speak generally and specifically. Generally, throughout the length and breadth of this country, the police would assist us as social workers and community health workers, and even persons in the community, family members, to respond to these situations where the person can be restrained, taken to the medical center or to the police station, and they are medicated by the relevant persons. Also, for example, in the St. Patrick Medical District, we have a 99.9% cooperation from the police, in that when we call, they assist us. And there are times the police will call us because in traversing and patrolling, they may see one of our clients, and based on their behavior, they reach out to us. So we have had a very, very harmonious relationship with the RGPF. And you see, most of the times here in this country, we only look at the glass half empty. We never see the glass half full. And therefore, we only look at the negative. We don't look at the positive. And we don't speak of the success stories that we have with the police ministering to our mentally ill. We also have the issue of housing for some of them. Okay, in some cases, efforts have been made, and in some cases, we continue going on and on and on and on. So as social workers in psychiatry, and I'm sure Ms. Cyrus would agree, we continue to be advocates for these persons, not only the mentally ill, but all those who seek social intervention. So we have to be advocates, we have to continue to knock the door, and we have to continue to give these people hope. Now, in some cases, I believe the assistance is slow in coming, and I think there must be a fast-tracking process. That is something that could be looked at. But generally, we continue to be advocates, and we also continue to meet the well-being and help with the basic needs of our clients, and also by extension, the community. Also, we have a challenge. Some of them are hungry. And people in Grenada would say, Grenada have food all about. People cannot be hungry. Well, I tell you, I'm saying to Grenada now, joke you're making. We are grateful from citizens abroad who would send clothing, footwear, foodstuff, that from time to time we're able to make food hampers, right, for our clients. There's nothing budgeted in the Ministry of Health as far as I know, because we go out there and reach out to corporate Grenada personally. You know, as I mentioned before at the beginning, mental health mental illness seem to be a curse. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before we wrap, Miss Cyrus, Father Mark just hinted to the stigma that's attached to persons with mental illness. Do you also get the sense that there's also stigmas attached to persons who may be financially reprieved, that are in need of help, that may probably make them reluctant to, because they might be, for the fear that they're castigated and categorized as being in a certain social grouping that is seen as being less?
I cannot really say a stigma, but what you may find that persons may feel, because of the mental state, this as a state of depression or so, they may need someone to take them to the next level. So it's not that it doesn't want the help, because as we say, the cow that is not one that hungry. So what? Sometimes these persons out there, it's not a stigma, but the person needs the help. But you know, in Grenada we have a little thing. We have our pride, and as people may say that they poor grit, but It's not that they poor grit. It may mean that it's not a stigma. Maybe if I come, they may think that they never expected. So they're thinking, I never expected. But we do not look at that. When they come, they get a different feelings. So if somebody they are saying that they don't want to come to us because we feel in a category. They have placed themselves in a category. But in our services, we do not have that existing. We do not stigmatize. We treat a person as an individual, as I said, for the work, and we are there to provide a service to that individual, regardless of the status.
Thank you, Don Cyrus from the Ministry of Social Development, and Father Edward Mark from representing the Ministry of Health. And again, to the caller, as we said, Ms. Cyrus, so appealing to him that once the program is ended and we're getting ready to wrap up now, call me back in the studio. I'm going to call me back in the studio. Same number, 435-2041, and I'll provide you with a direct number for Ms. Cyrus. So I'm not going to give you an extension. I'm not going to give you a number for a ministry. I'm going to give you a direct number, and you can feel free to follow up. Here's what we're going to do. If I give you the number, and so for those who's probably thinking, because I know people are thinking, well, she's probably just going to say that publicly. So, my dear sir, I'm challenging you, and let's challenge the system. If we don't get a response from Ms. Cyrus, give me a call. Yeah? You don't get a response from her, it's not satisfactory, give me a call and we get involved. And if that doesn't happen, then I'll put you on to Father Mark as well. Let's see. We are going to get it able to work for you. My dear sir and lady, indeed, it was a pleasure being here with you. Father Mark, we've agreed. This is just the start of we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. We're going to continue with this. Ms. Cyrus, for years we know that you go over and beyond, and sometimes with the challenges that we may have one situation that not been attended to, but very often we bypass the myriads of other persons and families that you've helped, and certainly we say hats off to you, and keep safe, keep doing what you do, my dear sir and my dear lady. All the best to you. You take care.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being on your program this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All the best to you. Wonderful. It's 10 minutes gone. 10 minutes, exactly 10 o'clock in the studios. I want to say thanks to all of our listeners, those of you wherever you are, those on social media, Yulian Alexander, Alistair Warwood Sr., Lady Thomas, and the rest of you, wherever you are. Indeed, it's always a pleasure being here with you. Continue to do what you have to do, play your part, so that we can improve who we are, first as individuals. Good morning, Ingrid Bourne. First as individuals and families and as a society. Until then, so long, everybody. JC loves you. You take care of yourself.